There's this thing that middle-aged people like myself do when they get together with their middle-aged friends. They talk about their ailments. In one of those ailment-airing chats I had with a friend a few years back, the subject of my poor sleep came up. My friend, who'd had his own battles with substandard slumbering, asked me, "Have you tried Kava?" At that point, I hadn't heard the word Kava in about 20 years, dating back to a trip I'd made to Fiji in the early 2000s. I vaguely recalled a group of Fijian people sitting on the ground, drinking what was described to me as something that was calming, but tasted like muddy water. So when I was offered the chance to try it, given that uninspiring sales pitch, I passed. A lot has changed since my trip to Fiji in the early aughts, and even in the handful of years since my friend suggested going to a pharmacy to get some kava drops to mix with water before bedtime. Popular culture's growing embrace of multiculturalism and the trend of people in their 20s and 30s seeking alternatives to alcohol have led to kava's rise from being a traditional drink in the Pacific to something you can find in kava bars and lounges in major cities far from the tropics, not to mention through online retailers. And it's led to some debate between kava traditionalists with Pacific roots and those who may be blending kava into mocktails right now in a city near you. I'm David Peterkovsky, and this is Pop Comforts, a podcast series that explores the unexpected corners of popular culture that bring us comfort. But first, what exactly is kava? A very quick biology/anthropology lesson is in order. First, the biology. Kava is derived from the root of a plant that's cultivated on islands across the Pacific, including Vanuatu, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Tonga, and even Hawaii. When that root is ground up and mixed in water, it creates a drink that's non-alcoholic but has sedative qualities, making the one who drinks it feel relaxed. And, anthropologically speaking, kava has been served in these island cultures for hundreds or even thousands of years, a tradition that brings community members together by creating a space in which they can sit with one another and have conversations while easing their minds with the soothing drink. But beyond the Pacific, kava business is booming. A trade group known as the International Kava Organization estimates that the number of kava bars globally has doubled within the past 2 years, and the price of kava has gone up 100% over the last 10 years. So how has this traditional beverage from one somewhat remote corner of the world managed to become kind of trendy? To help explain the kava situation from all angles, you're about to meet a woman from Auckland, New Zealand, who's got a view of kava's past as the Tongan-born daughter of a kava merchant, a role in its present as the owner of a kava lounge in Auckland, and an eye on kava's possible future as a PhD candidate looking at how kava can be used to treat those who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Hello, my name is Arnau Monsieur Henry. Myself and my husband, we own and run Borsha's Kava Lounge, but alongside that, we also work on research projects. We run a number of community initiatives and deliver workshops to a lot of organizations looking at strengthening their cultural competency around Pacific. And we use Kava, Pai Kava, and Dalano as a framework. Also, PhD candidate from Waikato University.
The youngest of 7 children, Anau migrated with her family in the 1980s from Tonga to New Zealand, or Aotearoa as she frequently refers to it, using the indigenous people's name for the country. But she often went back to her family's property in Tonga, which included a kava plantation. So it's not surprising that she never really knew a time without kava in her life.
My earliest memory is that of the kava roots and the pounding machine, the pounding of it, the smell of the kava, when it's dried before it gets pounded. But even that drying process, putting it on like a tarpaulin, having it on the roof or on the concrete ground in the driveway in Tonga to dry it out. So those are like my memories that I can remember, yeah.
And your parents, you mentioned that they had a kava pounding machine. I'm not sure I know what that is. Can you describe what it is?
Yeah. So my dad, he was born and raised in Vava'u, just off Tangatapu, but still part of the Tonga group. And he moved to the mainland when he was a teenager, and him and my mum, they met, and one of the businesses they ran in their home was there's a Kava pounding machine. So we were one of the early ones, like back in the early 90s, that had these things. And so the Kava pounding machine is like two big aluminium or steel poles in this box looking thing, and there's a wheel, and it just crushes the dried kava into like powder. Then it goes on to this sieving machine to sieve it out so that the big pieces of the kava plant don't, it just gets the finer powder. So he had two of those machines and the kava pounding, like a room, like a garage, a shed that was on our house, on the property of our house in Tangatapu.
Anau recalls frequent family visits back to that house well after they'd resettled in New Zealand.
So we migrated to New Zealand, stayed here for a few years, had to get our, residency. So once we were permanent residents, him and my mum decided the best thing to do was, so they always went back to Tonga because they had both homes, because my dad was a farmer. So that's what he did. He had cows, he had bulls, he had pigs, in the bush. And as a kid growing up, that's what he knew was the farm. So then they would always go back, and alongside the farming of cows and bulls and all that stuff, he also had the kava plantation. So he was growing kava in Ewa, Baba'u, the outer islands. So he spent a lot of time in Tonga. We spent a lot of time in Tonga when we were kids.
And at what age were you able to try kava? Were there any minimum age laws around it?
No, there wasn't. It wasn't like, like alcohol, there's laws like, okay, in New Zealand, you're 18, you can, it's kind of not like that. I think with kava, it just depends on the parents and how comfortable they feel.
So even as a child, it was just part of life?
Yeah, it was just, it's just a part of your culture, part of who you are. You don't really stop to really think too deeply about something that was just a part of you.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll get to this a little later. We have a kava bar in my town here, and there is a minimum age of 18. I don't know if that's just an American thing or what, but...
kava is definitely not alcohol, but I do find that, and then I'm not too sure what the regulations are with kava in the United States. I don't think it's a food product, whereas in New Zealand, kava falls under food here. So, and then it's not alcohol. So even if you give someone a little bit of kava, the chances of a young person wanting to drink kava all the time is probably highly unlikely because of the taste.
So let's fast forward a bit to your opening of the Kava Lounge you and your husband run in Auckland. How did that come about?
It actually came right off a talanoa or conversation, and it just seemed like the thing to do. Kava for me was it's always just been there. It's always been part of my identity and my childhood. And it just seemed like a natural progression to then open the Kava Lounge. And, when you don't have, we're like working these 9-to-5s that we're not really interested in. And here I am thinking, man, I love my culture. I love Kava. I want to be able to keep these memories of my childhood, of my parents alive. What better way than to do it through what I know, and that's Kava. And, kind of just navigated that space with other people as well and hashed out that idea. And we were like, you know what? Got nothing to lose. Let's give it a go.
Uh-huh. And were there other Kava lounges in the area?
No. So our Kava Lounge is pretty much the only one that is Pan-Pacific, that is the way it is here in Aotearoa. But I also, would like to acknowledge that there are other types of Kava Lounge. I think in total there's about 7 or 8. And there's also the traditional whai kava. Whai kava means to do kava. It's the traditional setting of kava. We sit on the mat, and it's usually in the Tongan setting, it's men, they're playing their guitars, sharing stories, they're talking about their day. And those are very much alive and thriving, especially here in South Auckland, where there's a lot of Pacific culture, Pacific people. But in terms of like how we do it, we're probably the only one. Well, we are the only one that do it.
Uh-huh. And who would you say your customers are in terms of demographics?
In terms of demographic, funny enough, there's actually like a lot of between that late 20 to like late 30 age group. And then our younger generation, they come to a lot of the events. When I say young, like that early 20 to like late 20, which is showing me that there's a lot of people just moving away from alcohol. There's a lot of wanting to actually have a third space. Like we have our homes and our workplace, for our Pacific communities, a lot of them, they have their churches or community groups. But actually, we want a third space that's probably neither one of those, that we can have a different type of conversation, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't say there's one strong type of demographic. It's kind of more like, people who resonate with like collectivism, community, and like the Pacific ways of doing things. It kind of draws that type of people rather than an age group and an ethnicity. But we definitely do have a lot of non-Pacific. Now we're seeing with, people traveling again, a lot of Americans coming through, the British, because they're a bit more familiar with Kava. But it's definitely more kind of like some, like a mindset or a way of thinking.
And have you had to do a lot of education, so to speak, about what Kava is and why people should drink it?
Yeah, 100%. That's what we do most of the time. That's one of our values as a Kava Lounge is education. Education is everything. And, my husband, Todd, he's in his last year of doing his PhD on climate change in Tonga. So he's a researcher. I'm a researcher. It's nice. It's nice to be able to have that kind of skill set and also run a business, because when it comes to culture, you need to be informing the space respectfully alongside the oratory knowledge that's been held within our communities for centuries. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to pivot from the cultural angle to more of the industry angle. How do you feel about things like Kava drops and things like that? Are those useful or a natural extension of what Kava is?
No, quite simply no. And why that is, one, the research is not there to say that this is a healthy way of consuming Kava, so I don't trust it. And two, the only research I do have is the 3,000 years of drinking Kava as it was in the traditional cold water method, that my Tongan ancestors have done it. So that's what I rely on, is that knowledge. If they didn't see that it needed to be changed to add coconut juice, pineapple juice, whatever else was in the islands at the time, then why should I change it? I honor that practice, that 3,000 years and more of practicing the Kava drink. Whatever else, the other stuff, I'm just not interested in it.
Yeah, I actually was recommended by a friend when I said I couldn't sleep well. He said, "Oh, have you tried Kava? You get these drops." And I went to a store and I bought the Kava drops, and you put like 30 drops in a glass of water and you drink it like an hour before bed. And it's pleasant, but I'm wondering from somebody like you, when you hear that, do you just kind of roll your eyes internally? Like I'm a sucker?
It's really hard to separate the Kava culture. For me, Kava and the culture they go hand in hand. So for myself, I don't separate them. The Kava, Kava, Talanoa, they're all meant to be together. They're working together. You're meant to be partaking in Kava with others. It's meant to be like a communal thing. But you start like separating it and isolating it into these very different types of forms. I don't know.
Yeah. It sounds like what you're saying is me drinking a glass of it at 9 o'clock at night alone in my kitchen is not the Kava experience you think of.
Yeah, it's definitely not that Kava experience I grew up in or know of. But yeah.
So along the lines of research, I, of course, found you through the University of Waikato, where you're a part of a team conducting research on the use of Kava to help treat post-traumatic stress disorder. Can you talk a bit about how you decided to pursue that research and maybe expand on what the study is about?
Yeah, so the study obviously is led by Dr. Aporosa and Associate Professor Sione Vaka. Dr. Aporosa, he's been in this space for a really long time. And previously, he was a policeman. He's come from that kind of background, and then is now, as our leading Kava researcher here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I guess he saw that modern medicine was not the only answer to healing frontliners who were experiencing PTSD, and it's natural that then Kava, because that's our traditional, it's also like a traditional healing method. The act of talanoa and releasing what you experience, or releasing the anxieties and stress through the practice of collective talking and collective knowledge sharing, collective storytelling. So then he looked at not formalizing, but looking at how do we have this specific practice sit alongside as an option for people who are experiencing PTSD, which makes a lot of sense to me. And that's why it was really important that I joined, I think, for myself. Obviously, I'm in the Kava scene as well, but yeah, I definitely believe in the vision of the project.
And you're pursuing a PhD? Do I have that right?
Yeah, correct. Wish me luck. No.
Absolutely. You'll be a very well-educated Kava Lounge proprietor.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm still finalizing what the key questions are, but at the moment it's looking like to be in that space of like, so what makes the fine Kava space so different? What is it that is in this space that people walk away feeling less like a burden's been lifted or being heard? So yeah, still deciding on what those 3 questions look like and whether it's going to be a comparative case study where I can compare it to other types of social settings in other countries and then isolating elements of the fine Kava space that makes it different or unique. So yeah, still ironing it out.
So I went to a Kava bar in my city twice in the past few months, and I have to say that I enjoyed my drinks, but I would say the experience of the Kava Lounge itself felt far from what I would call traditional and what you're describing. I mean, they had dark lighting, computer animations projected on the wall, a lot of people talking, 2 or 3 people here, 2 or 3 people there. There were no mats on the floor, and best I could tell, I didn't see anybody of Pacific Islander heritage working there. And I think I had a Kava chai drink, and my friend ordered a Kava colada. And as I'm telling you all this, I'm almost embarrassed. I mean, I mentioned all of it to ask you the question. Do you have concerns that the Kava experience could lose too much of its cultural connection if it gets too popular, goes too widespread?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, we've seen that over the decades of coffee, which is why it's interesting watching the Kava Lounge space in the United States, because it's always going to be very surface. There's not going to be that depth if you don't take the time to do the learning around the culture that this product that you're selling is from. Kava is very, very deep. It's got so many layers. It's a part of who we are, so it just comes off very naturally. But if you're selling it and not really understanding what it is you're selling it, then you have to ask yourself, why are you selling it? Is it just to make money? I understand that at the end of the day, we all have to feed our families. But Kava is so important, so significant to the Pacific culture that if you're just taking it and commodifying it and not really understanding it, I don't know, like you have to ask yourself, okay, what am I really doing here? What am I trying to achieve here? But at the same time, my lane is, wanting to grow Kava in a positive way and educate people and correct these misconceptions around Kava as alcohol, Kava as this, Kava as that. That's all I focus on. But every now and then you look up and you see what's happening in the horizon. I just do what I need to do. If that makes sense.
I think my next Kava has to be at your place instead of over here if I want to have something authentic, I guess. Earlier you mentioned workshops, and I'm not sure if we touched on exactly what goes on in them. Can you talk about that a bit?
The workshops are more for corporations who are wanting to understand Pacific culture, and we use Kava, Fai Kava. That's how we express or deliver using those tools. So last year, one of the last ones we did, they wanted us to do like a Kava ceremony at an end of year, like work function. So we do stuff like that. And we always make it really clear that this is a Pan-Pacific way and that this is not the only way, because Samoa is different to Tonga, different to Fiji, different to Vanuatu. But some of the workshops we do is around well-being. We do workshops around just actually people wanting to know what is Kava. So we do a little summary, a history of it, contemporary uses of it, and then perhaps what does the future look like, and then the principles of Kava, and then how do we use that meaningfully in our lives now. Yes, just quite often we work the organization and just see what they want for their staff, and then we'll tailor our workshop to them.
You're truly a Kava ambassador.
I know. Now that I'm talking to you, I'm like, yeah, I really am. Should get a Kava ambassador, like, I don't know, hat or something. T-shirt.
Yes, a badge. I should ask you this. How often do you drink Kava?
Every week. Todd is more the relaxed person. My husband Todd in the business, he's a bit more social. I'm the one that does all the back end stuff. So even though I should drink more Kava, so I'm not as uptight, I don't, because I operate on being uptight. I operate on a faster pace. And so if I drink kava, that's going to chill me out a bit to a pace that I'm just not wanting to operate on. But yeah, I drink every week. Todd drinks every day.
Oh, wow. Can you do too much of it?
Not at the ratio we have it. No. Too much is kind of when you drink kava from 4 p.m. to like the next morning. That's too much. But the ratio we got, the kava and water ratio, it's good. And then also the shop closes at 10 or 12, so people have to go home. So yeah, it's fine.
Uh-huh. So one last question for you. For maximum kava impact, what's the best way to prepare it and drink it?
And the best way to have maximum kava impact is I'd have a light meal in the afternoon, maybe 3:30 or 4 p.m., right? Then I'll start drinking kava maybe 6:30, so my stomach is not too full, not too bloated. I'll get the powder, put it in a strainer, get some water, and then I knead it. And when you see that bubble bubbling at the bottom with the water, that's the active property of kava lactone. That's what you want to see. And then once that's done, I like to be, dim lighting, not too bright, some good music, chilled out, good company, good people there. If it's just one other person, I might have a journal because I want to write things down. And then I'll sit down and there's nothing else to do in the evening. I'm just going to drink kava and have really good conversation with good company. At the end of that, go home, have an amazing sleep, wake up, and no hangover. That's a good conversation for me.
Yeah. What I really like about it is how much the company factors into it. It's not just you by yourself. It's who you're with that seems to be a big part of how much you get out of it.
Yeah. And, obviously some people drink kava on their own as well, which is fine. And that's great for moments of contemplation or reflection where you just want to sit with your thoughts. But obviously, because I personally love to socialize with other people, especially people who are good at having discussions, and we don't have to agree, but we're respectful of each other's views.
Sure. Well, and now I'm so glad we were able to bridge the 21-hour time difference. Kava is something I've known about since my first trip to the South Pacific 20-something years ago, and I'm pleased to see its visibility getting raised here and elsewhere, and I'm thrilled to talk to the Kava ambassador herself. This has been fun. Thank you.
Oh, it's so lovely to talk to you, David. Thank you. And honestly, you have to make your way here. Come all the way to Four Shells so we can have a talanoa face-to-face.
That would be great.
Thank you so much, David. And yeah, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, thanks to Anao Masui Henry, I've got an offer for an in-person talanoa and kava drinking session with someone who knows the drink well and is well-versed, by way of her upbringing, in the kava tradition. But if Anao represents the Pacific cultures for whom kava has always brought comfort, today there are many others who have learned to embrace kava, and from all walks of life. In fact, I thought I'd reach out to one of them who's distinguished himself online in recent years as a kava connoisseur.
My name is Douglas LaRose. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, and I am known as the Connoisseur on YouTube and online.
Yep. As the self-proclaimed connoisseur, Douglas LaRose has made a name and a catchy pseudonym for himself with his social media posts and YouTube channel where he discusses the benefits of drinking kava, reviews various kava products on the market, and covers all kinds of happenings in the kava sphere. But how does one become a connoisseur, and in Baltimore of all places? In Douglas's case, his passion for kava grew out of a need to soothe his anxiety more than 2 decades ago.
I was a community college student in San Diego, California, and I was a very anxious young person and had a lot of uncertainty in my life. And I was working at a health food store and looking at the different natural options for stress relief. And one of the herbal pharmacists, as they called them at this store, she pointed me to a bunch of different stuff that didn't really seem to have an effect, like valerian root and chamomile tea. And then finally, she suggested kava. And when I tried kava for the first time, I was like, oh, yeah, this is it. This is the stuff that I fell in love instantly. It had an immediate effect and impact on my stress and anxiety and became my go-to drink to end the day and kind of fall into my nighttime mode.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall specifically what it was that you liked about it? I know it wasn't the flavor.
Yeah. Yes. Well, what I liked about it was with a lot of other things, including illegal substances, you get messed up and you can't focus and you become disoriented. But what I liked about Kava was that it calmed me down, but it didn't take away my focus. And it allowed me to do my schoolwork and to relax without, the confusion and the psychoactive effects that come along with things like marijuana. So the fact that it was so subtle and soporific was really something that appealed to me about it. And it was just an immediate kind of love story for me.
And at what point did you decide to take things to the next level by singing the praises of Kava online as the Cavasaur?
Well, Kava wasn't really widely available in the United States at that time. There were only a few options, and this one was an instant Kava, which was called Kava King, and I don't believe they any longer exist. But I kept drinking Kava throughout college in the form of yogi tea, which was like an extract of Kava. And then I served in the Peace Corps, and after I got back from the Peace Corps, I went into graduate school in 2008, and at that time, Kava started to become available online, different varieties of Kava from different vendors in different countries. So I started singing the praises of Kava online because there were no good resources for learning about Kava and knowing how to buy and prepare Kava. So I reached out to the vendors who were selling Kava, and I started doing reviews on a Blogspot website. I think it was one of the first Kava blogs, if not the first Kava blog. And people immediately started subscribing, and hundreds of people started leaving comments. And I realized that it was the germane phase of what is now a pretty big Kava community online.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Kava was hard to come by initially. At what point did that change? Was that when Amazon and other big retailers online started selling it?
Amazon came a little bit later to the game. I would say around 2007 to 2008, Kava started to become available online through different websites. There was Knock 'em All at Home. Hawaiian Kava Center was one of them. A lot of vendors that no longer exist that went out of business. But at that time, there were 7 or 8 different vendors online that you could buy Kava from. But yeah, Amazon was a little bit later to the game. I want to say 2010, 2011, you could start to get some Kava on Amazon. I think it was Hawaiian Kona Kava was one of the ones that was on Amazon first.
And as you're diving into the world of Kava, friends and family, are they wondering what it is you're ingesting and getting excited about? What kind of reaction did they have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is one of the first concerns, especially for younger people. People automatically think that it's some kind of drug, some kind of narcotic. And I guess technically it is. So you have to really explain to them the research behind Kava, the safety of Kava, the non-addictive qualities of Kava that make it a manageable habit or kind of way to relax that isn't dangerous, won't cause any negative side effects in your life. But it's still, I mean, my parents to this day, I've been drinking Kava for 25 years. And when I talk to them on the phone, they're, well, are you still drinking that Kava stuff? and I'm like, yeah. And I'm still, very healthy, what do you know?
Okay, so I want you to wear your Cavasaur hat here for a second. So if someone's listening to this and they are uninitiated in the world of Kava, where should they start if they want to explore it?
Oof. This is like the elevator pitch type question.
Yes.
I think if you live in a city where there's a Kava bar, which unfortunately are not, kind of few and far between, and they're concentrated in certain parts of the country, if we're talking about the United States, I would say, go to a Kava bar and talk to the Kava tender and learn about Kava. But if you don't live near a Kava bar, I would recommend going online, doing some quick Googling and seeing what Kava interests you. There are some Kavas on Amazon and they're all very good. So you could buy Kava on Amazon and have it delivered within a couple days and try it out for the first time. But you're definitely going to want to go on YouTube and look for videos. I have some videos on how to prepare Kava, because that's not the most intuitive thing. And you're also going to want to be patient with it, because a lot of people, the first time they drink Kava, they complain that, they don't really get anything out of it. It is something that you have to learn how to drink because it's very subtle. It has very mild effects. And over time, you learn to appreciate them more as you drink kava. So yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. There's a pretty steep learning curve, and the amount of people that try kava is a lot higher than the amount of people who stay with kava.
How about powders versus pre-mixed kava drinks? I've seen you drink the latter on your YouTube channel a few times. Is there any significant difference between the two, generally speaking?
Yeah, the pre-mixed drinks that come in the bottles, they're few and far between. There's a vendor, Karuna Kava, who sells little kind of Capri Sun type packets or sachets. Those are really good. They're quite strong. And then there's other kavas, and actually he uses whole root kava when he makes his kava. And then there are other vendors who sell drinks that have kava extract in them. I prefer kava that's made from the whole root. It just has a more complete effect to it. But I'm a traditional prep type of person, so I'm always making my own kava. When I'm making it, I would always say go for the traditional prep. And if you're scared of making it yourself, you can try out the sachets, or if you live near a kava bar, try kava at a kava bar.
Uh-huh. So in preparing for our chat, I was poking around online to see if anyone mentioned any adverse effects of kava. And I found things posted online that referenced a possible link between kava drinking and liver issues. And I think I know your stance on this. So do you want to debunk that myth right now? I'm going to go out on a limb there.
Well, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but I have a lot of very good friends who actually study at the clinical level kava. And all of the research shows no link between kava and liver damage. Basically, what happened was in the late 90s, early 2000s, in Germany, there was a product sold on the market that contained kava, and it was a pharmaceutical, and it was connected to liver damage issues. And Germany put a temporary ban on kava, but they actually reversed it within a year or two because they did studies and found out that there was no connection between kava and liver damage. But unfortunately, that announcement and that initial temporary ban is still one of the first things that jumps up when you Google kava. On top of that, you can look at countries like Fiji and Vanuatu, Samoa, Tonga. There are not widespread liver damage issues when you compare those populations to other populations. So it's pretty much as simple as that. And of course, I would encourage everybody to do their own research before ever trying something new that they might have concerns about.
Mm-hmm. So back to Kavasaur hat time. Let's say hypothetically that you're talking to a guy who's interested in kava to help improve his sleep. He's not necessarily interested in investing in kava grinding or mixing equipment or what have you. What does the Kavasaur suggest to this hypothetical person who you may or may not be speaking to right now?
Well, first of all, I would say that there's not much of an investment to make. The only thing you have to invest in to make kava is one of the sieves, the kind of cheesecloth type bags. And I think those run you like maybe $4 or $5. And most vendors actually, if you ask them, they'll throw it into your bag when you buy your kava. So, I mean, that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is it's not that difficult to make it. I mean, I just made kava about 45 minutes ago, and it took me about 8 minutes to make the kava. You just need a bowl, kava, water, and then that cheesecloth. So, don't be afraid. It's not a huge task to undertake.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, I will pass that along to said person. I don't think I asked you this. How much and how often do you drink kava?
I drink kava basically every day. I take breaks every now and then, just because. But yeah, I drink it mostly every day. Like when I get home from work, I'll make kava and sit down and read, do some work. And then if I'm drinking alcohol, like if I go out with friends and we're gonna have beers at dinner, on those nights, I won't drink kava. I'm not a big drinker, so that's not all that common to begin with.
Mm-hmm. So you're having like one shell of it a night or more?
No, I generally drink when I make kava, I make about a gallon of kava and I drink the whole gallon. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You are the Kavasaur.
Yeah, I basically, I'll start drinking kava around 5 p.m. and I'll drink it until about 9 p.m. and I'll just kind of spread it out over those 4 hours. And then it lulls you nicely to sleep. And that being said, if I don't drink kava, I still fall asleep fine. I don't need it to go to sleep, but it helps. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So a bigger picture question for you. You recently posted a video on YouTube in which you talked about the growing embrace of kava outside of the Pacific and how the notion of cultural appropriation seems to come up as a result. Can you talk a bit about this embrace of kava and what you called cultural appreciation?
Yeah, there's been some controversy in places like New Zealand and Fiji about kava being embraced in the United States and in Europe and Australia. This is really kind of a recent thing. I've been drinking kava for 20 years, and this topic or controversy didn't really come up until, the last year. My perspective is, along with a lot of Pacific Islanders that I know that are my personal friends, that kava growing in popularity and being consumed in different cultural contexts and even becoming its own culture in different cultural contexts is a positive thing for kava as a whole, because it's a drink that brings peace and solace and is good for community building and for sobriety and for, reducing violence and things like that. So I always like to tell people when this conversation comes up that, kava started in Vanuatu thousands of years ago, and then it moved throughout the Pacific as the islanders set out on their boats. And so as a result, there are already all these different kava traditions to begin with. So the story of American kava is just a continuation of that kava story. And, I believe when you go to a kava bar, and you have a shell of kava and you learn about kava from someone and you share that experience with other people, that you're carrying on that kava tradition. And that's not cultural appropriation, that's cultural appreciation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the term. It's a nice twist on things, and I think it puts it in a positive light.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one last question for you. Just today, I saw a story in the newspaper saying that alcohol use is down considerably among Gen Z and millennials. And I'm wondering if you see any connection between kava's gaining ground outside of Pacific Island culture and that trend. Have you made that connection at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm from California. And California is often ahead of the curve on some of these things. I noticed 5 or 6 years ago when I went back to visit my parents that there were a lot more kava bars, and a lot of people who surf and who are really into kind of a more athletic lifestyle, who are younger, like Gen Z, were drinking kava at these kava bars. And, for women, it's a safer experience to go to kava bars because you're not having to deal with drunk men. And then for people who are trying to be healthy, generally speaking, alcohol isn't a very good thing. So, yeah, I am noticing all over the country, online as well, an embrace of kava as alcohol becomes, I think rightfully called out for its toxic characteristics in our culture and society. I take kava with me to people's homes and prepare it, and we drink kava together in place of alcohol. So, yeah, I really do think that it's a really positive thing to see people calling out alcohol for being the very dangerous substance that it is, and embracing kava as a healthy alternative to that. There's not an alcoholic that I've ever met who is thankful that they were an alcoholic. So,
yeah. Well, Douglas, it's not every day I get to speak to a connoisseur, so I do appreciate having this chance to do so. And even though neither of us, as far as I know, has Pacific Islander heritage, I've enjoyed having this talanoa with you, as they say.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, the connoisseur's various tips and his point about the drink's rising visibility in popular culture as an alternative to alcohol are all duly noted. And his notion of cultural appreciation definitely helped me reconcile what I saw in my local kava bar with the traditional kava drinking session I witnessed in Fiji 20-some years ago. So, I'm gonna try and blend tradition with trendiness. I think I'll take what Anau told me about the connection between kava and conversation and mix that with Douglas's suggestion about being patient and open to the experience of drinking kava. And regardless of how it impacts my sleep, I'll still lean into the relaxation that comes with enjoying the drink, and maybe even a good conversation with my fellow Kava explorers. Pop Comforts is a production of me, David Peterkovsky. My thanks to Anao Misui Henry of the Four Shells Kava Lounge in Auckland, New Zealand, for her perspective on Kava's past, present, and future. And my thanks to Douglas LaRose for sharing some of the insights he's gained as the Kavasaur. In the show notes, you'll find links to Anao's Lounge in Auckland, as well as to the Kavasaur channel on YouTube. Music for this episode was provided by Chris Zabriskie, Blue Dot Sessions, and Ernie Francisstein. You can find the Pop Comforts webpage on Medium.com, specifically at popcomfortspodcast.medium.com. And be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. On the next episode of Pop Comforts, we'll hear the story behind a pop song that first came to prominence in the 1970s as a catchy ode to friendship, saw new life in the 1980s and 90s as the theme song to a beloved TV comedy series, and still continues to make its heartwarming, earworming way through popular culture today. The story of Thank You for Being a Friend, next time on Pop Comforts. Until then, thanks for listening.